Well, what's going on? Welcome to ednews.com. It's your host, EJ Carrion. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Matthew X. Joseph, district leader in Massachusetts. We're going to talk about transformational leadership. Matthew, welcome to the show.
EJ, I'm psyched to be here. That intro, the music, the clapping, the graphics, I'm just psyched to be here. Great stuff you got going on. And I've heard some of your past work and just honored to be the next guest in this long line of really impactful work you're doing.
Yeah, well, I know you just have a book that came out, The Power of Connections.
Yeah.
And how do we have power of connection? It came out over the summer when
Yeah.
when in-person connections was kind of hard. So it seems like, how are you guiding connection and community throughout this time? And what do you tell the people who look at you as an expert?
Yeah, well, I mean, look at us. We've never met. You found my work on Twitter or Instagram or somewhere, and you reached out to me. We communicated through channels, and now you and I are chatting. And that is really the foundation of the power of connection, is finding and connecting with inspiring educators across the globe. And for me, how I have seen that, and as you said, for a while it was hard to connect in our outside of our brick and mortar schools because we were in school. Then we were out of school. And it became this time of, how am I going to continue to grow? I think we put quickly in the been established bucket that no one would have chosen COVID, and no one would have chosen the work that we had to do for that 18 months. But for me, I'm somebody who looks at that transformational leadership and say, how can we maximize this time? Let's not complain about it for more than that one day of like, this really stinks. And how do we evolve? And that's the
Mhm.
biggest thing for leaders. So I started to talk with, I work with Brian Aspinall, who's the CEO of Codebreaker, and we talked about supporting leaders across the globe. And this was one of the ideas of how to stay connected during this time where we have to focus on student learning and we have to focus on our own growth as leaders. So I started to research ways to connect, from podcasts to Twitter chats to Voxer book studies. And I pulled all of this together. And one of the major things, and it's happening tonight, it happens every Friday at 10 o'clock, we have an innovators lounge where it's just an open meeting where educators, leaders, innovators from across the country and world, really, we've had people from Australia and Africa and join in, and we just
Wow.
talk and we just hang out. And it's called the Innovators Lounge. It's not shameless plug, every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern and every other Monday at 7 p.m.
And,
And
and
for
and that is
me,
on Twitter.
it is. If you follow me, you can sign up. I send you the link. It's a Zoom link, and it's just an open meeting. And for me, one of the big things is authenticity. And if I was going to write a book about connecting leaders around the globe and building a global professional learning network, I had to model what that looked like. So I worked with Swivel to do a digital book study, really all using their tools. And I contacted, worked with Brian Aspinall and had a Zoom leadership meeting and an educator meeting twice, a week sometimes, because for me, I was someone who attended conferences. Maybe once a month, I'd go to different events, and I'd feed off that energy, right? Like even chatting with you this morning and that awesome, cool intro. It's like, it makes me think like, oh, I can do different things with graphics and sound. And we learn from other people. And too often we were getting stuck in our own kind of way. We were stuck in the mud. And the way to get through a difficult situation is to, in my opinion, is to call on the expertise of others. And what can somebody else do to motivate me? How can I be inspired by what somebody does? If anybody has a podcast, watch this and see what EJ is doing with picture in picture and cool graphics and sound and transitions. Like, that's inspiring. But I wouldn't know that if we didn't connect. I wouldn't know that's a possibility if we didn't have some form of common ground. So the power of connections is really, again, not to sound a little kind of educational ease here, but it started at Boston College when I did my research on enhancing school culture. That was my dissertation study. And what I learned was that the big findings were people wanted to feel valued and connected. So it was like, okay, that's the real, education side of it. And now I would put a practical lens. Well, how do we do that with the tools that we have? We have Twitter, we have Instagram stories, we have all these different things that, I'm not saying share what you had for dinner and you're going to become a better leader. It's showcase a lesson you did with Flipgrid. Another thing that, we've been trying to do, not in a shameless plug, but I really want to get to the heart of what Power Connections is and how this is transforming leadership. Every other Monday, myself and Sandra Donahue, who is a principal in Canada, who I met through the Innovators Lounge, we do a thing called Connections Without Borders. So we use Flipgrid and we put out a question every 2 weeks. Today happened to be one of the launches. And we just ask a question to leaders across the country. And today's question was, what is your September surprise? So it's just leaders sharing, like, what was a surprise to you to kick off this year? What was something different? And we use Flipgrid, and you just log in and record a couple minute video, and we find inspiration from other people. Last week was, what was your favorite? Well, we do every 2 weeks. So what was your favorite way to welcome back students? And I heard so many creative ideas from leaders who I've never really met ever in person. But because the way leadership is evolving and our technology is evolving, this was something that was inspiring for me. And that's really the heart of the book. The why you need to do this, and then there's ways to do it, and then capturing, there's 83 leaders from across the country that contributed to the book and how they have connected and improved because of it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you speaking, I think about the power that is for teachers and professionals and educators. It makes me think about, you know, professional learning networks is something that I feel like we don't advocate a lot for students. Like, it seems like, how can we build how you've been able to build these communities? Do you see any schools doing the similar things with students where they're really building a global community for kids to connect, not just with their local schools, but also with networks of other students who are doing great things on campus, different projects? That's what kind of registers with me. What do you know from a
Yeah.
student perspective, how we
Yeah,
connect kids globally?
absolutely. And I'll share an example if that's okay. And again, it's always hard to share your own examples because it seems like it's a humble brag of some form, but at the same point, it's what I know. So it's easier to kind of share and let others, really hear it and put it into perspective. So in my district, I worked with this amazing teacher, Donna McCants, and she was a second grade teacher. And we were doing a project about student leadership and student voice and student advocacy. And we learned how to use Flipgrid again, and we used Wakelet and different tools. And then the next project was on habitat. And I was like, okay, let's take this a little further. We were comfortable with the technology now. And I have a friendship who I've met at conferences, again, connecting folks. Kristen Nan, who she is a educator in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh area, Pittsburgh area, and then another educator in Alabama. So what we did was say, all right, all three classes, do your own work, talk about your habitats. And then we made one big Flipgrid that each of the students in the different, really three different areas shared what their habitat was. Then the students would comment on the other people. So here in Massachusetts, in the winter, it's cold and snowy, and there's not that many animals out. And then Alabama, it was snakes and cold, hot, and we got to learn that. But then the second level of that, we then said, let's have a common time that all three classes are on at the same time. That we did like a Google Classroom for us because we're a Google district. And we did another prompt. It's called What is a Good Friend? So we brought two classes together online. This was before COVID, before it was like everybody does this. And we had digital communication, and it
Wow.
really started to showcase that we don't need to be bound by our zip code, that we can, there are students, there's millions of students that walk through the doors every day. Why are we not allowing our students to use that?
Yeah.
Because if our goal as educators and public K-12 education is to prepare students for the real world, there are very few places that they just go and sit all day long
Mhm.
and not communicate with other people and not talk with their peers and not do things outside of their work environment.
Yeah. Is there conversations around what you're talking about? I mean, you were doing this before COVID, but is there conversations you see happening more often among your communities that wasn't happening pre-COVID or even during COVID? We're kind of on that back tail end. What are some
Yeah.
popular conversations happening?
So I think what's happening is we conversations around we can do this. So some of the things that you would see at events or thinkers from around the country, like try this, try that. Sometimes within your own district, you got weighed down with, well, we can't do that. We haven't tried that. And the new conversations are, oh, we can do it now. And it's really trying to match the technology with the content. So the conversations around how are you linking that to school goals? How are you linking this to district goals so that it's not just I call it the wow factor, that it's not just something cool that you're doing, because like this is a cool graphic. It's cool to meet with you. It's cool to chat. But if there isn't an impact statement that comes from it, then are we being educators? Are we being leaders? Are we modeling what we want for our students? So I think that's what the conversation is. How are we shifting to listen to what students need more? Because what happened during COVID was, for lack of a better word, the teachers lost some control. They lost some of the onus of this is how we're going to do it. It was like, okay, I'm going to send you work through this, whatever. It could be Google Classroom, it could be all these other, management systems, and then I'm crossing my fingers that you do it and it comes back in some way. And now that we're back in our brick and mortar schools, the big conversation is, how do we harness that creativity? How are we still allowing students to be, you know, to self-regulate, to create projects that are not just what we tell them to do?
Yeah. I know innovation's a big piece to what you speak on and what you're fascinated in, and in the work you do at your district as well. What does innovation look like to you now? I mean, when we think about, I just think it's an exciting time. We're had this once in a lifetime investment into our public education system through the rescue plan, and so I think there's so much opportunity. COVID showed us what 2030 looks like and where we can get to, but at the same time, you're having these this democratization of what does it mean to be empowered to do learning. I mean, more kids are doing homeschooling.
Mhm.
Obviously, there was always like charter school networks and private schools. It just seems like a really important, pivotal time for school. So innovation seems to make sense. What does innovation look like in your district, and what do you prepare other districts to see when it comes to innovation?
Sure. So here's my thought on that, is that personally, and again, I don't want to put anyone else's judgment into this, that innovation is not a thing. That we sometimes get caught up in the things and try to make those innovations. You give a student an iPad and you have them do a worksheet on it. That's not innovation. That's not digital teaching. That's a
Mm,
$500 worksheet. So for me, innovation is a mindset. How are we celebrating successes by attempts? Are we celebrating attempts, or are we celebrating the end product? Innovation is creation. How are we creating an environment where students take risks, where students, I say this a lot, prototype what they're doing? So if you think about any of the businesses, or Apple, Google, Amazon, they didn't just happen, right? There was things along the way that they tried and that didn't work, and they fixed and they updated and they gathered feedback. That's innovation for me. So it's about failing fast. What I mean by that is students attempting, getting quick feedback. Is this working? Yes, move forward. If it's not, try these things. So innovation is a mindset and a culture. It's using the tools that we have. It's using we're using a tool right now. We're using a computer. We're using online access. We're using the tools, but the tools aren't innovative. Your cool show and your questions are what's innovative. Using the graphics, using your questioning techniques, using your flow and cadence to create something that looks different than somebody else might do it. So for you, that's innovation. I think it's great, because I've done multiple podcasts where they each have their own flavor. So for me, I can see this is your lens, your flavor, and that's innovative. Because when you in the sense are the learner here, when you get to create and you get to try things, and as we shared before you came on here, you have a different computer, that's prototyping what works. And for me, what innovation is, and innovative leadership, is creating a culture that allows attempts, that celebrates progress,
mm,
and that failure isn't the end. It's just, how do you learn from it?
yeah,
Because in our traditional system, you take a test and you get a grade, and you move on. And that's not really learning. That's memorizing and getting a score.
yeah,
Where learning it evolves. And so for me, innovation's evolving.
yeah. You, you know, what is your kind of um, advice or coaching for education leaders? something that you said to me that just really resonated was how it's a mindset. And there's several districts now that has chief innovation officers and
Hmm.
chief innovate or innovation departments, but it seems oftentimes maybe districts could be focusing, those departments are being responsible of shooting the shots and doing the innovative projects, but it almost seems like their role, if there is a CIO at the district, is to actually be teaching people innovative mindsets throughout the district, because innovation happens anywhere.
Yes.
And so how do you help districts teach innovation for even maybe their most conservative faculty who maybe doesn't like to put up shots and they don't like to fail?
Yeah, sure. I think is kind of Oprah Winfrey as this sounds, is you have to take care of yourself. And the work that I do to move individuals to be more innovative is have them articulate what they do well. What do you do well? And when you do that, you can focus on the things that you contribute to your leadership. And what it also does is, typically when there's roadblocks put up, it's because someone's doing something you're not comfortable with. That a student is using TikTok to do a project, and now a teacher like, that's not comfortable for me, for it, so it's not right. So for me, it starts with building confidence in the teachers that it's okay, that students, or building confidence in leaders to say teachers can run a staff meeting, it's okay, and building that up. And then the second thing, and not in a super shameless plug, but talking about connecting with educators across the country, because if you see what other people are doing, if you see these great projects that are happening, to start to get to the why not me mindset. Why can't we do that here? Well, now, why can't we try these ideas? Granted, they're going to look different. I always, say, let's lesterize it, or whatever district I am in, like make it our own. How can we make these ideas our own? So I think starting with the individual, being confident and being proud of what you have and what the gap in your leadership. For me, there's plenty of gaps, and I search out other people to learn from them. So getting the leaders, the teachers, to just accept that there's things that you don't do as well as somebody else, and seeking them out and learning from them is actually strength and growth.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of close. I know something you're talking a lot about when you do presentations and sessions is transformational leadership.
Yeah.
This is a transformational time for public education. What kind of leaders do you see we need to have in order to thrive and build up 21st century schools that compete on a global scale?
Sure. I think it's actually there's not a skill that's going to get a transformational leadership. It's someone who's authentic and open to a growth mindset. Transformational leaders are ones that are learners. And when you are a learning leader, you continue to evolve. Because one of the things I learned real fast as a teacher, and even faster as a building administrator and a district leader, is if someone can see through you, they're not going to believe in you. And if you
Mm.
aren't passionate about what you bring to the table, then you're not going to have a believable message. You don't want a compliant staff who just does it because you're the leader. That's not leadership. That's being the boss. Like, being a transformational leader is being passionate about what you do, being authentic, but also being open to sharing. These are things I don't do well, I need help with. And for me, that has been a big shift of saying, here's things I don't do well. I'm not a great emailer. I send my real important emails to our guidance counselor and say, can you lighten this up? Can it not be so bullet points? Can you help me seem more human, in a sense? Because I'm a very to the point person, and that wasn't working. So to be transformational, we have to try some things. I have to learn how to do a podcast so I can help our students do it, because they're going to want to do it. I have to teach our staff how to use YouTube to allow students to give their projects. We may not like it, but that's where the world is moving. And we have to be open, authentic, and willing to learn.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Joseph, I appreciate you for the time. Thank
EJ,
you so
thank you
much for
so
coming on
much.
to Ed News. Hopefully, we can have you again in the future as more
Awesome.
and
Looking
more things
forward to it.
develop throughout the year.
I'll count me in.
Awesome. Take care.
All right.